Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming here today to the auditorium at SL11B Community Celebration. I'm delighted to be talking today to Beq Janus, who's been a friend of mine for a very long time and involved in so many of my projects as well. Sort of being co-opted onto, yeah, I think she's one of those people who knows to run and hide whenever she gets an IM that starts Beq, but she never quite manages it.
Yeah, I need to learn to run faster.
Well, I must say you've cleaned up for this talk, because usually you, quite frequently, you have a coat of Babbage soot and grime on you as you do stuff. Because, of course, you're one of the leading builders in Babbage.
Yeah, I thought I'd better scrub up a little bit and try to look my best, a little bit presentable at least.
So, when did you first come to the grid, Beq?
So, I arrived in April 2007, and I actually came here and came ultimately to Babbage, which I arrived in Babbage early May, I think. So just when I was just a few weeks old, because I actually met a Linden in a pub. This was back in the days when we had Lindens in England, and Babbage Linden was doing a presentation in at a conference that I was at in Oxford, and we went out in the evening and had a chat and a drink, and he was extremely excited about this world that he was working in and this place, and he described it and about all the different things you could do, the way you could create things, and there were railways that worked, and people built these houses, and it just sounded kind of intriguing. So when I got back, I decided to go and check it out, and that was the beginning of the end, I guess, or the beginning of the beginning, or something.
So you came in to Second Life. How quickly did you find Babbage and steampunk? Was that always something you were looking for?
No, not really. So when I arrived, I was kind of lucky. I mean, it's as we've seen in our SL11B build. I mean, I think even back then the newcomer experience wasn't the most compelling thing, and I kind of got lucky. I set up the account, jumped in, and I got halfway through the training. There was a thing called Help Island back then, and you went through. You had to carry this torch around, and you sort of waddled around with this prim torch for a little while, and then I found the search tool. I can't remember. I searched for something completely random and just hit teleport and jumped off, and I wound up in a sim called Tanglia, I think it was called, which was I think it was some kind of role play sim. And I was just very, very lucky. I met somebody who's still a good friend of mine even now, who said, "Oh, you're new," and it was kind of obvious because you're carrying a torch.
Yeah, it's a giveaway, that one.
Yeah, but they sort of took me off to the usual sort of freebie places, got me set up with something vaguely decent looking, and then just took me on a whirlwind tour of these places that they knew. So there was an estate at that point called Metatheria, which was this brilliant sort of elven land with a giant world tree. I mean, this is, when you consider this was really just at the time, I think sculpts were just about to come onto the grid. They certainly weren't in use. I can't remember what date they were released, but they certainly weren't in use a lot. So this was just a basic prim tree, but it towered high above the sim, and there were platforms in it where people lived. And I sort of went around that, and we flew on a magic carpet up to these ice castles that floated in the sky, and we parachuted off and down to, and it was just amazing fun, and I was hooked. I think if it had gone the other way, and I'd found some nightclub type place with bling everywhere, and I just wouldn't have come back. Oops, I've crashed.
Right, well, just go away and come back as quickly as you can. Beq's just crashed, so she's going to go away and she will be back very shortly. We hope. You're still here at the moment, Beq.
Okay, just
let me IM you. Still here.
Really? Okay. No, there we go. I should be gone now.
Nope, still seeing you. You've gone.
Okay.
Okay, grab a seat and turn on Second Life voice.
I still have a downloading clothing dialogue, but I'll be there shortly. Hello, am I back?
You are, minus your top as in my viewer, but it will come. It will come. And at least you're wearing an alpha.
Yes.
There you go. You're all back now.
Good. So let me try and sit down. No seats yet, but...
and you've got a dot, so you can...
If you can find a better pose, when your hands are up to your mouth, Beq, they're getting all fragmented and look funny sticking out of your chin on my camera. Okay. So if you can find a better pose, that's probably good. Thanks. Whatever you want to do, but I just thought I'd mention it while we had a chance here. I'm mute again and rolling.
Okay, so Beq is back and we're going to continue. Beq, you were saying about your first experiences, your early experiences.
Yeah, so I had this first couple of days that just showed me this brilliant range of different sort of fantasy worlds. But then after that, I thought, well, I know, I'll go and see if I can find Babbage Linden, given that he was the reason I came in. I thought I'd look him up, and I just did a search for Babbage, and instead of finding the person, of course, I found the place. And back then, it was just Babbage Square, one sim. It had been around, I think it started in February 2007, so it was a few months old. And I arrived, and there was this amazing Victorian square with these brilliant buildings, and there was a railway, and I don't know if you remember, there used to be this, and it was there for years and years, these animated smelting plant which would tip up and pour this molten metal everywhere, and just seeing all this sort of industrial stuff that was moving around and actually working was great. It wasn't just dummy stuff. It was properly built. And then there was a sandbox. I don't know, it was a sandbox then. It just looked like a cobbled square, of course. And these two guys sort of wildly jumping around and building things. And it turns out, funnily enough, they were actually building some gifts to go in the first, as far as I know, the first Babbage RFL vendor. Because, of course, Relay for Life had had started up, and it was around the time when the RFL season was kicking in. And so I sort of went over and had a chat and watched them, and that was just intriguing to watch people collaboratively sort of working together and getting stuff working. That was very interesting. And then I met another friend. I mean, she's no longer here in SL. Annabella Voom, her name was. You still find her properties around Babbage. They're kind of become landmarks in their own right. You see them on the skyline. It's the one with a big sort of windmill type contraption on top.
All right, I know that one.
And back then it was just one square, and she was looking for a place to stay, and so was I. So we said, oh right, we'll chip in and we'll rent a place. And that was really it. As it happened, the canals appeared, the Babbage canals, the second Babbage sim appeared a week or so later. It was about the 18th of May, I think, when it first appeared. And we stayed in a row house. There was a little very cheap row house, simple sort of one up, one down building with I think you had 100 prims to use in your own right. Actually, might have been less than that. And we stayed in there for about 2 weeks, and we said, oh no, this is no good. You can't stay here and not build and own property. So we bought our own land, and that was the first land I bought. The plot that now holds my factory, and is opposite the Annabella's build that I described a minute ago. And yeah, that was it. And so I was one of the first settlers in the canal region of Babbage. I think then the next big move was after the 2007. I'll have to get my dates right. The 2007 Relay for Life was when they did the undersea tunnels, and that was a brilliant build. And took you down through tunnels underwater, and nobody had really done that kind of thing before. And from that, they inspired the Avernian Sea Sim that was became one of the, I think it became the fourth Babbage Sim. And I bought another plot in there, and that's now my undersea sprawling build that's known as Aegir's Hall.
Because of course you actually have you spend time as a dark mer, don't you?
I have done, yes.
And were part of the campaign to get the mer the vote in Babbage.
Yeah, we did some. That was when another former Fenval was sort of the leader of the mer, and she was very that was Viv Trafalgar, and she was very active, and part of the Armada breakaway sim, of course, as well. And so that was some good role playing. And that was another thing that actually brought me into Babbage, was the role play. I think we came in 2007 summer was the first of Loki Elliott's brilliant series of role plays. I mean, they still carry on, but it was a murder mystery type event, and that's really, they really sort of bring you into the community. They were very good.
So a nice strong sense of community there. One of the bills, I'm sorry, we're going to have to gallop through because of the time. One of the great bills you've done in Babbage is, of course, Maison Horta. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so that was actually the first large thing I ever built. I think before that I built a pair of shoes. And it was all really a big learning process for me. I'd never been Photoshop. I'd never done anything like that really. And this is, I think, if there's one thing that I represent in Second Life, it's an example of what Second Life can do, which is give somebody the ability to become creative, to develop skills they didn't know they had. So, as I say, I'd never picked up Photoshop. I'd never done anything remotely like building anything in 3 dimensions. It was all brand new, and I picked that because it's a personal favourite place from real life. It's the museum now of Victor Horta, who was a great Art Nouveau architect. He was from Belgium. The house is actually in Brussels, in the suburbs of Brussels now. And it's a great place. I was always inspired by the design ideas that he'd put into the construction of the house in Victorian times, when everything was really sort of brick built and everything. He was bringing in all these new materials of steel and bringing light into the centre of a large house. And that was something that was very interesting to me anyway. And so when it sort of came to building something in a Victorian era, that was the first thing that sort of came to mind. And that was really where I started. And it's still largely, perhaps my shame, it is pretty much exactly the same building that I built in 2007. It's on the list of needing to be upgraded, and the facade, actually, if you look at the front now, it is mesh and materials, but the rest of the house is entirely prim. There's a few parts of it. I mean, Art Nouveau is a bit of a difficult task when you've just got prims. So there's a few sculpts crept in there, but it's begging to be rebuilt, and so that will happen. Maybe once we've got Relay for Life out of the way, and there's sort of 6 months until I have to start worrying about those things again. Maybe that can come to the fore again.
Well, they will probably be begging you to set design for the Black Mirror again.
That was good fun. That was a good fun build, which you can see just around the corner, of course.
That's right, and you can try out the amazing re-scene where you can put yourself into the actual movie and have pictures taken with the stars and everything. It's a very fun build, and it's just over the hill behind us. And Beq was one of the set designers for that. She did the Mad Scientist studio and and upstairs the doctor's study.
And the interrogation room as well.
Yes, which was very effective. And that was fun. Of course, you've been involved with creative projects as you weren't part of the cast, and we really must revive this of the quest for the Golden Prim.
Yeah, that was always good fun as well. I was Frankie, the captain of the airship,
with deep and dark secrets to hide.
Yes, which we never got to unhide them, did we? No. We never got there. So, I mean, all of the characters that were in there all have a backstory that was fairly well developed, because the whole idea of that concept was to have rich characters that would evolve and people would learn more about them as the story went on.
We really ought to pick that up. It kind of folded when the Primgraph did, which is a shame. So we really ought to pick it up again and do that again. But as well as being an actress, a set designer, a builder, and we should probably come back to some of the later builds you've done. But before we do that, I want to touch on your career as a writer and photographer, machinist.
So what we really said is anything that Saffia can sort of push me towards.
Well, yes, you started taking photos for Prim Perfect and writing for it as well. Well, you started with the Primgraph, did you?
I think I probably started with a Primgraph. And I'm trying to think what the very first article was, but I'm pretty sure it would have been a Primgraph article. And then the first, it's a long time ago.
I remember years ago dispatching you to InWorlds to write about Julia Hather in InWorlds.
Yeah, and that was a fun article to do. Sort of being, and that was I think the first article I did in Prim Perfect, because I sort of struggled because I didn't have the kind of journalistic voice that was required for it, and I wanted to write it as a story, which is how we wrote in the Primgraph. And we sort of ended up reworking it and sort of, but that was fun. And we sort of moved on from there quite a lot. And for a long time, I was doing the Linden Home articles. I sort of did quite a few of those for a while. And then I guess in the last 18 months, focused on doing a series of mesh articles, which came around really, I think, because there were a number of comments from people that we know who are established designers and had been around for a long time, but were worried that they didn't know where they were going now because mesh had come along and it had stolen their market, and that they were worried about having to retrain, and they weren't really capable of doing that. And so I sort of started, whether it's been successful in this aim or not, I mean, I started the series of articles to try and dispel some of the myths of mesh. So certainly back then, this was January 2013, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and mesh was the big mystical sort of thing that nobody really understood, and it was big and scary, and you could only do it if you'd paid $1,500 for a Maya license, and there was a lot of rubbish, frankly, being put around. And I'd been building. I mean, I use a mixture of a few tools. I have 3ds, which is the only commercial package I use, and Blender, and an in-world tool called Mesh Studio. And it was really Mesh Studio, which I still believe that is the tool, or a tool like that the Lindens should have provided. It basically allows you to put together your prims and build in world as you would previously, and then convert that into mesh. I mean, if you're using Firestorm these days, you can export your prim builds as mesh as well. It's slightly different in the way that it works, but you can do it without tool. But back then, it really was the only credible option for still doing the kind of builds that have brought many of us here, the community type building and the social building, to be able to be in world, talking to people and building, and that's something that's sort of started to go away. So we focused on firstly sort of explaining what mesh was and why its time had come, and how it sort of followed on from prims, then sculpts, and then mesh, and what the difference was. We moved into buying mesh templates, and there was an article about how to get a mesh template and how to texture it, because again, people didn't understand how to texture a mesh object. It's actually pretty much the same as you texture a prim. To be frank, you have individual faces, and in the editing tools, you select face and apply a texture. But of course, if you don't know that, it's not necessarily obvious. So there's an article that covered that, and that linked in with a full magazine that we did on textures, if I remember rightly.
Yes.
And then we sort of moved on through a series of projects that I built using the in-world tools, and just most recently we moved on to the uploader and how to upload, and that's really where most people stumble with Mesh. It's a complex process. It's a very simple process. You can just load an object, click upload, and up it will come. But get it to work properly, to get all these massive savings and the economies that people hear about, you actually have to understand what Mesh is, how it works. Because if you don't, you'll end up with something potentially a lot worse than a prim build, especially certainly if it's large. So we had to cover things like levels of detail or LOD. What does that mean? How does it impact the land cost, the LI of your object, and what you can do about it? So there's a couple of articles on that. And the next article, I don't know when the deadline for that one is yet. We haven't got that scheduled, I don't think.
We're doing a relaunch in September, so that will be when we do the next session.
That's good. Time for research then. But that'll cover physics, and I think physics is one of the least well understood aspects. I mean, I've done now a couple of stints in things like Builders Brewery Chat, and even in places like MeshDev, which is a fairly expert group, where I've explained physics and the difference between analyzed and non-analyzed physics in the upload. Now, if you've never looked at the upload screen, this would all be complete gibberish, but it's something that people don't understand. It is explained on the wikis if you find it, but it's very hard to find. And it's also the source of one of the biggest traps in SL today, which is you can quite happily create a single prim object that is 1,000 plus LI. I could do it here right now.
I'd really rather you wouldn't.
A single standard prim, and it's all down to the way that the physics algorithms work, and it sort of makes sense once you understand it. You can work out why it happens, but it's not explained anywhere, and even people who've been working with Mesh for a long time don't get it, because it's not anything to do with modeling. You won't see it in Maya, you won't see it in any of these other tools. It's specific to the way that SL calculates the physics cost. And the unfortunate thing is, if you take a standard prim and apply a material to it, you've not done anything to the physics, you've done nothing with Mesh, but because of the rules that the lab have applied, that prim will no longer be a prim, and the prim cap, the one LI cap that's applied, is removed, and suddenly you're into it's being treated as Mesh, and suddenly you've just filled your sim up, and that's a problem.
I saw that the other day with someone. They'd done something with a rogue prim, and suddenly everyone was kicked out of the sim. It was just completely full. It was very scary.
It's dangerous and not well understood or explained anywhere, and it's something that I will cover in that next article. And
I look forward to that. I think it will be very interesting to see, and maybe the time has come that we should issue a booklet of your Mesh talks, and we certainly ought to issue that little that little video you made, because there's that
the
brilliant
time-lapse
video. We ought to put it out, because that's showing how Beq built a clock, and it's in time lapse, and you just see her building. You even see a few mistakes as she goes along, but essentially they're all.
Yeah, it's warts and all, building from scratch. Just a fairly straightforward grandfather clock. It's a working grandfather clock with moving hands, but it's a fairly straightforward build using in-world tools to create a mesh object that looks reasonably decent, and it's a 10-minute video compressed. I think it was about a 2.5 hour build, I think, with rooms for cups of tea and things in between.
We don't see the cups of tea, I hasten to add.
No.
So let's just touch on one of the things that you've done that you haven't talked about is that you've actually been the embedded reporter for Prim Perfect on Relay for Life for the last few years. And you've done some fantastic things reporting different events. And of course, once people realise just what a fab builder you were, you've actually become involved on the building side. We've rather lost you as a writer because you're absorbed in building. So,
yeah, it's a problem. There's the only so many hours in a day is definitely an issue for all of us. But yeah, I started. I would hate to think how many relays I've covered now. Certainly 4 or 5, I think. Where we'd sort of go through, and one of the big undertakings was to go through and do a detailed write-up of take a large event like Fashion for Life or Fantasy Fair. Fantasy Fair is probably my single favourite event on the grid. I just love it. And I'd go in and walk through the sims and do a detailed write-up, lots of photos, and that would take a day per sim. And of course, there's 10 sims, and the event lasts for 10 days, and it gets kind of scary. And that's quite a hard undertaking. Quite time consuming, but it's very fun, and it really gets you inside the builds. And then of course this year I got this year got promoted into being a builder there, and I created the Aspiratus sim, which was a steampunk
I love that.
based sim, which was a giant about 263 meters, because it actually poked over the border into the sim next door. 263 meter airship that had various balloons and unusual flying vehicles around it that were harvesting the clouds. It was fun. It was a good fun.
I loved
build.
the whole concept of cloud storage that you were using.
Yes, yeah. The idea was that they needed the element, the clouds float, as we all know, and what we don't realise is they float because of an element in the cloud. So they harvest this, and the bits of fluff that you trim off the clouds get sucked up into these large balloons that I denoted as cloud storage as a fun little pun, of course. And then that has to be then processed through cloud rendering. To produce a gas that will keep the balloon aloft. That's yeah, that was great fun. And then last year, of course, I did the Relay for Life build on the telephone sim, and you had that wonderful studio build from Foe, and across from that, I built a recreation. This is my usual thing where I say, oh, I know, I haven't got much time to do this. I'll do something straightforward. I know, I'll build something that's impossible. So I took one of the illusions, the optical illusions created by M.C. Escher, the 20th century artist. If people are familiar with his work, there's a one called the waterfall, where water runs uphill through a zigzag of towers to cascade back down again in an impossible loop. And so recreating that on a sim scale was also, that was an interesting challenge. And,
I know you did. It was very, very cunningly done. It was very cunningly done by creating an optical illusion.
Yeah, and the trouble was that they only work when you look at them from a specific angle. So then I needed a way to get people to the specific angle to see it. So I had to build another Escher recreation, which was his early 1920s woodcut of his called the Tower of Babel, which was this enormous sort of black and white tower depicting the biblical story. And then I perched a telescope on top of that, and if you looked through the telescope, it set your camera to the exact perfect sort of viewing position. So that was good. And then, of course, Saffia being this source of constant ideas, and you're never short of things to do, suggested idly, it would be nice to have a hunt. So with like 2 days remaining, I sort of rushed off, and Saffia kindly collected all of the flags of the I think there are 16 different organizations that we wanted to represent, 16 global organizations that had been researching jointly cancer. And we're sharing information, and we wanted to bring this kind of international element out. And so that hunt was representing that, and I ended up creating an entire hunt hub and all sorts to go with that, which was...
That was brilliant. And yeah. In a couple of days, I just casually mentioned it, but I wasn't actually thinking anything quite as complicated. That's the thing. I would say that I come up with a brilliant idea, but when I share it with you, you generally take it like a step further than my conception and make something absolutely wonderful. So I thought people would just go around and look at flags and click on them and get note cards. And you incorporated a fantastic HUD into it as well. And if everyone collected all the prizes, they got a brilliant prize at the end. They got a model of the waterfall. It was brilliant. So, and yes, I've even had you building here at this build, because I would say we're both quite passionate about the need for community in Second Life.
Yeah, I think we touched on that in the way that I arrived here. There was no way that I'd still be here if I hadn't have had the good luck of meeting that person back then and being shown, or have then taken that step and almost accidentally found Babbage and the community that was there. If I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be here. There's no doubt about that, and I wouldn't have learned all the things that I've learned, had all the fun that we've had. But it's something that's missing, and it shows in the low retention levels that we see. And there was that brilliant video that was made that you posted on the blog, demonstrating how a newcomer is effectively just left to fend for themselves. And of course, most of them kind of shrug, give up, and go back to Facebook. And so you've had this brilliant concept of the communities and how we might use those to foster a real sense of belonging for newcomers, for them to have something to get their hooks into, to sort of cling on to for those initial few weeks. I think once you've kind of come over that first sort of 30 days or so, you've worked out what you want to do. You know how things are. And I think that will be enough. And these are really something that I think we both believe strongly in.
Yes, indeed. And so you've made these architect models of what could be ideal newbie sims. We've got the New York brownstones.
We had a big long list of them, didn't we?
We did have a big long list, and we whittle them down. There is actually the Hunt Gift contains one of them that isn't seen elsewhere, which is the fantastic tree houses. But
based on my own experience, of course, that I mentioned there. There's we have the New York brownstones, which are surrounding a kind of a central park area, and
with a pond.
Just would be a nice, relaxing place to be.
And a cafe and artist easels, lots of things.
Yep. Then we had the houseboats, so a marina, a full marina with a beach, a bar area, and just lots of houseboats everywhere for people to live in, and of course you'd have fishing and all sorts of sports and things that could be put in there to again foster that community feeling.
Yeah, you could probably also put some quite interesting
Alpine Village as well.
Yes, we could probably put some interesting things under the water in the marina, like the Blake Sea and certainly Blake's Deeps, Francis Deeps. If you go down there, you find some amazing stuff that people just don't even guess at.
Yeah, you can do. There's some brilliant guided tours that I've seen that use the same kind of thing as you've seen with the hot air balloon tours in places like Africa, but do scuba tours instead.
That's brilliant. Fun. And the fourth one is, of course, the Alpine Village. In some ways, my favourite, I think, with the little ski lift, the miniature ski lift.
Miniature ski lift and a ski ramp. Again, this completely different types of things to do there.
A pond to go skating on.
Ski area to go in there in the sort of hub there, and pond to go skating on, ski jumps. It would just be a nice place to if you when you first res, if you get there and you go through whatever initialization phase you have, and then you've just got this array of different communities that you could go for, and you can just browse through them and say, oh, actually, I quite like. I really like history. That Victorian era, that looks good fun. Let's go there. Or I love fantasy things. That elven tree. That looks brilliant. That's just me. Let me go there. And you could do all sorts. I mean, you have Vikings and Romans. I mean, you just anything that you think of. Obviously, there'd be science fiction. The options are endless. And I guess you'd have to control them to not completely melt down the whole system. But it's got even a limited number would be far, far better than just being dumped in the middle of nowhere.
Do you think, we've been talking earlier, I don't know how much of the talk with Jessica you were able to get into, because it was pretty packed.
Not at all, sadly. Yeah,
but you've heard about the plans for the new generation of Second Life and how they're hoping that we will go over there and make our homes there. Do you think if they did something like that with this new platform, that would be a way of attracting? If they said, come over, you can have a home on one of a dozen communities for the first 30 days to see how you like it. Do you think that would be an attraction for people here? Not just newbies, but for people here already, if they had something to go into a nest?
But most of us here have our communities. We're here because, in large part, we're here because of the communities that we have. So I think you need, and that's the one thing. I mean, I'm in two minds about the whole thing. I mean, I'm excited. I think there's a whole load of potential, really great stuff that lies in this new platform. But the potential, and I mean, there's been a lot of clarification around the statements around backwards compatibility. The potential lack of backwards compatibility is the worry, because there's lots of other new platforms. I mean, we talked about InWorld, so you've got Kitely, you've got lots of other versions out there, and we had, of course, Blue Mars that I think is still kicking around, and everybody had said, oh, it's a SL killer at one point, but it never really transpired, and the reason for that is because of us. It's because of everybody, the person sitting next to you, the person that you spend your time talking to. That's why we're all here, I think, for the most part. And I don't know how you move that forward. That's going to be a challenge. And I think if they have to limit the backwards compatibility or the interoperability, I think the ability to talk between them, so you can still communicate with the friends that you leave behind or the friends that leave you behind, that I think will be very important. And the harder one, I think, because you're obviously going to have two different viewers, the harder one will be the ability to TP between the two. And they're completely different environments and technologies and avatars, everything else, but actually just to be able to jump between them would allow you to coexist. And I think that will enable us to move. It's going to be an interesting one. It's going to be very interesting.
It is indeed. It does look as though we can continue names, which will be something. Hopefully that means they're allowing second names.
Well, they'll have to, won't they? Because a bunch of us have them. So if they're going to carry them forward, they'll have to carry those forward. I mean, that's an interesting one, of course.
Yeah.
I wonder how many residents would choose to retain residence.
Oh, well, I think if they built up a strong enough identity as resident, but quite a lot of residents have got two names. They're just not their legacy name because they haven't been able to get that. Yeah, but if you think about it, Frisky, how many outfits from 2009 are you still wearing? No, quite. And if the creators were in a position to be able to say, okay, I'm selling this here, I'm also selling it in the new environment, and if you buy it here, as soon as you get into the new environment, you can download it. How would that feel? Would that make a difference?
I think that would be an interesting one, wouldn't it? Because all of the discussions that we've had about the much debated terms of service changes, which allow the lab to take product and move it into other products. You see now part of the motivation for it. Yeah, you can see that there's the potential for them to allow the products that are here today to be moved into whether or not you'd have to rebuy it is going to be annoying, isn't it? I mean, that would frustrate lots of people.
Well, I think that the canny content creator, if you take someone like Damien Fate or Truth, folks who are pretty shrewd at high volume sales, it strikes me that what they might do is actually and if the lab did set up a marketplace that offered downloads into either environment, then you could actually buy something, and buying something meant you could pick up a copy of it in either world. So that you could, you would, you could choose to have it downloaded. Well, you wouldn't even choose to have it downloaded in one world or the other. You would just say, okay, I've bought it, and that would mean you could collect it, and you could collect it in the new world as well.
I think there's a problem there, though. It's a technical issue, isn't it? It's if you've got mesh clothes that are rigged today, they're rigged to a skeleton, and it's a very limited skeleton with 20-something bones. You have to assume that going forward, that limitation is removed. We're going to have a different skeleton. Maybe finally we'll have proper fingers and things, so we can start to do facial expressions. We can move our hands without having to have sort of slink, precast, posed hands and things. That has to be in the next generation. So of course your rigging is then not going to work unless they spend a lot of time and effort into providing backwards compatibility, and that's going to be a tough challenge. I think they've got 11 years of evolved functionality to try and do that too.
Yes.
And of course, the buzzword at the moment, if you look at something like high fidelity, which is one of the sort of potential sort of sources of innovation in this space, you've got them focusing on voxels, which is the kind of thing you see in Minecraft, where everything's built of these little tiny cubes. Minecraft is a very retro look, but if you sort of bring that forward, and it's quite a powerful way of representing objects, and it's different to mesh. When it comes down to rendering it, to draw it on your screen, it's still going for your graphics card and it's coming out as polygons, but actually the way it's kind of stored and handled on the in the creation phase is quite different. So whether they be able to port all of that over, there's a lot of questions, I think, and we just have to wait and see.
Indeed. Well, Beq, thank you so much for joining me here today. It's been great to talk to you, and I've got another talk coming up at 5 p.m. when I'll be talking to Joe Yardley of 1920s Berlin, and you're all very welcome to come and hear that one too. Beq, thank you so much. Really, we ought to get you on a platform like this more, because you have so many fascinating stories to tell.
Are you just like scaring me?
You were great.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.